done earlier.
I think so.
Go take it.
Sorry, Mike.
Are we live right now?
I noticed that normally Tuesday and Mr. are the only ones speaking during these meetings. Maybe we can, if someone joins, ask them to introduce themselves and like give them an opportunity of saying anything.
Ask them to what?
Introduce themselves, say who they are, and if they want to. So we open the line with them because normally it's just us in the room.
Yeah, mostly it's like us plus Ian from that forward.
But at least, yeah, that way they feel like there's a chance.
Yeah, totally. I've noticed the same thing in the past. Sometimes someone new would show up on the call. And if we don't like explicitly do introductions or something, I think it's easy to just show up and leave and never really interact.
Yeah, and I don't know everyone, so I appreciate it.
This is cool.
Does everyone have links to the doc that we've been keeping not so well track of?
Yeah, I always just get it from the calendar invite.
Yeah. Greg, do you mind just writing down, taking some notes?
Sure.
Just like writing down attendees. I don't actually know, like I don't know.
Marcus. Oh, sorry.
Nice. I just don't know who you were. So.
Yeah, we could do introductions.
Yeah. Sure. You want to just do a quick introduction? Just
Sure.
Name.
I'm Ben.
Role. I'm Michael. I'm on the Mesos team. You want to go around this one?
Hey, I'm Gilbert, the Mesos team. Gaston, also Mesos team, taking care of Chronos a little bit as well.
I'm G, Mesos team.
Marcus, customer success. Chris.
I'm Judith, I'm on the community team.
Greg, Mesos team.
We know it both on the message team.
Okay. Sweet.
Oh, I think you're adding them to the, or somebody was to the previous.
Oh, that's my bad. Yeah, can you just copy this? Okay. Do you want to start then?
Sure.
With the
Performance working group and stuff. Yeah, definitely. I also, can we toss on the agenda? I think it'd be good to, how do we feel about the frequency? Do we want to keep doing it every 2 weeks or want to do them once a month? With all the working groups now, I wonder if we want to
yeah. So
do these less a month.
Personally, I'm fine with reducing it to a month. Once a month.
Well, I just think like it might be, and we've had an agenda that was kind of like a week in advance or something.
Yeah.
It would draw more people. I mean, we had a great showing with like 12 people at the performance working group.
Okay.
And so I think that people do want to attend, but they can,
It's just
I think it's always last minute and like maybe we don't have as much of an agenda. People are like, well, I don't know what I'm going to be.
that's generally kind of how it's been going the last.
Yeah. So I just thought like maybe if we do it less frequently and we could even just assign out performance working group's going to present at one, containerization working group's going to present at one.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to fill in some other agenda stuff. It might help drive more folks to show up because we know they're out there.
Yeah.
We know you're out there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
So I can give an update from group's performance working group meeting. So honestly, Ben Muller needs all the credit for setting this thing up and getting it going and driving. But since he's out right now, I will give the update. So yeah, as I mentioned, there was probably about 10 or 11 folks showed up, and we talked about some of the current performance improvements that are being done. And then we talked about some of the future ones we'd like to do and tried to sort of slot in who might be working on what things. The hour went by super fast, actually. We could have kept talking, the group could have kept talking for another 2 hours probably about all the stuff that's happening. So an update on some of the current work that's being done. So basically, I would say the work is sort of separated into two, I guess I call it two main things: performance improvements in the process itself, and then performance improvements in Mesos. And then each of those kind of subdivided as well. So in the lib process side of things, the areas where people are looking at performance improvements are in within the actual event queuing and actor queuing and dequeuing and like the core of like the message passing and the scheduling of the actors themselves. So that's one big area. Another area where people are currently looking into performance improvements are in the like the actual interfaces into the process. Like Mike, and you could even talk a little bit more about this, but basically a lot of our dispatches and defers and thens on actors or on futures and all these things, we have to copy a lot of objects around. And so people are looking into how we can move things using C++ move semantics, or maybe even replace them with something like a shared pointer or pointers. And then third place is in the general HTTP path. So we've kind of been optimizing some of the message passing paths, but the general HTTP path. So the cool thing for the general message passing optimizations is so far with about 3 or 4 like major optimizations, there's like tremendously huge performance improvements. So for one of the benchmarks that that we're running, it used to take about 141 seconds to run the benchmark. Now it takes on our Macs about 4 seconds, 3 to 4 seconds, and on the on Linux boxes with a bunch of cores, it can be like a second, 2 seconds. So we used to run stuff parallel. So.
And that's just like a ping pong message passing thing between.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's a really basic ping pong. Create a bunch of actors, have them send messages back and forth. So that's great. I think that's some low hanging fruit from a performance optimization perspective, and that's gonna be great. And then the future work that the performance working group started talking about, as I mentioned, was beyond the process, also in Mesos itself, specifically around the HTTP handling and some of the HTTP stuff in Mesos. And I forget the list of all those things, but there's a bunch of other stuff we're going to look at, and people are going to be creating benchmarks so we can drive the optimizations, which I think is great. And I think in a future one, we can present what those benchmarks are and talk about the performance improvement we get from it.
That'd be great. Ideally, a blog post.
We're definitely going to write blog posts. Yeah. Some of the performance optimizations we've done thus far in the process are pretty interesting as well. Stressing, even stressing Linux semaphores and other things like that, and seeing how we can do those even more efficiently. So it's been cool stuff. Any questions I can answer? I said it at a super high level. So if people have I'm happy to answer deeper questions, at least on the lib process performance optimization stuff. If people are curious, but that's real high level. And then where
So is it coming in 1 or 4? Is the part is already landed or? Yeah,
so for the lib process stuff, some of it's already landed. So you can actually turn on, like right now, if you were to go take Mesos, you could compile it with a lock-free run queue. And then probably by the end of the week, you'll be able to compile it with a lock-free event queue as well. And then you'll also be able to compile it with a user space semaphore, which is the last really big optimization. So everything that we're doing, because we're introducing some pretty serious stuff, we're introducing all of it behind configuration flags. So all the existing code paths, for the most part, there's a couple of code paths that are slightly different because there's just some easy optimizations that we could do, like replacing maps with hash maps. Looking things up in the hash map instead of doing a count and then doing brackets, which are basically double lookups. In fast paths, those really add up. Adding a few double check locking idioms certain places. So all that stuff, all that stuff's changed, but for the most part, all these things are configured behind compile flags. So that over time, we hope to make them defaults, but right now we can let people keep feeling really comfortable about the performance or about the correctness.
We should definitely share that. I think this week or last week, the WeChat group, there's a WeChat group for China, like Chinese developers. So like a question came out, they hit some bottleneck on the events operator API, and they do some benchmarking and saying that they see some it's pretty slow when there's a lot of events. And well, I don't know exactly what that is, but like sounds like they had hit some performance issues. And also, I think Huawei guys also did some benchmarking for the process, and they used to report some numbers.
Yeah, I mean,
share those things with this blog post or whatever.
Yeah, I'd love to get back connected with the Huawei guys again, because I know we talked about doing some of these performance optimizations, and I mean, the optimizations we've done thus far, they're pretty giant, right? Like 30x improvements for message passing is significant.
You should definitely let them know and let them like redo the tests.
Sounds great.
So I have a high-level question. In Softcluster, we recently noticed that if you reduce the number of frameworks, completed frameworks and tasks that you keep in memory, then the master queue with backlog should be not something in the process, probably it's something higher level. Is the goal of the working group to also tackle things like that, or?
Yes, the goal is. So, and I'll just mention, so at Mesosphere, there's a SOAK cluster, and which is basically soaking Mesos all the time, and so that's where you saw the.
Yeah,
that's where you saw the
Yeah, we had to tweak those settings. So
you saw some. Yeah. So the performance working group is exactly working on that. So there's some folks. I believe Ian X is working on the benchmark. So Ian from Apple, I believe, is working on the benchmark for the HTTP events, so that we can have a benchmark just like we did for message passing, where we can look at the performance of like when a lot of HTTP events get queued up on an actor, like where we're spending all the time. And so they're going to try to contribute a benchmark that lets us tweak the kinds of events that will queue up on actors. So you can sort of see things like when they're large messages versus small messages versus all sorts of stuff. So I think we'll be able to create a pretty compelling picture. But yeah, we're going to eat through all that stuff. Yeah, in the message passing benchmark, the 100, so when you go from 141 seconds down to a couple seconds, you basically go from 100,000 messages per second to about 3 or 4 million messages per second. So significant amount of throughput increase that you get when you make those changes. Right. Cool. Yeah, and again, Benham's leading the performance working group. Not me.
Cool. Great. Okay. Thanks. I think everyone appreciated that.
Yeah.
Cool. G, you want to talk about the answer?
Yeah, let me actually share my screen.
It looks like somebody joined online. Do y'all know who that is?
Oh, that's me, Avinash.
Oh, hey, Avinash.
Can you hear us okay?
I can.
Excellent.
See my screen? Yeah, we had a couple. I think I have like how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 or 6 meetings so far.
So how's the attendance been in general?
Pretty good. Like I think every meeting at least like around like today was like 10 people. Yeah. Like yeah, I think attendance is pretty good. Like around like 10 people every time.
The diversity as well.
Yeah, so we usually have like Apple, Twitter folks. Today I invite like Microsoft guys because we want to discuss something about the ownership stuff, volume ownership stuff that's kind of relevant to the Microsoft guys. So I invite the Microsoft guys to the meeting as well today. So we have so this is the notes. I think we have a planning spreadsheet. That's what we did. So that's pretty much like all the things that we want to do in that area. This one. So basically, like for each feature that we want to do, I kind of like trying to ask folks to specify like what's the current status, what's the urgency, and the Apple estimation, and if there's a target release that people has to get those features into a release, what's the target release, and who's owning those features, and like who's going to review those features. So far we've discussed a bunch of high priority, high urgency stuff like this one. I think we spent like a few time discussing this one, volume ownership group cleanup. I think that the main thing, the reason we want to do this is because I think right now it's kind of a mess, the volume ownership stuff. So basically right now, like it's kind of a legacy issue where like we always change the owner of the volume to be the same as the container user. As things grows, like for example, we want to support Docker containers, container itself can define user, which might be different than the host user. And also we added more type of volumes like secret volume, sandbox volume, Docker volume, and some other volumes. And and also Apple guys add this like share volume support. So like you potentially can have two containers and a different user wants to access the same volume. So we have those kind of like more use cases, and things get more complicated, and the current model doesn't work anymore. We need to do like a holistic fix for that. I'm trying to figure out a solution to solve all these problems. I think we have 2 discussions so far in the working group, and we're waiting for Microsoft guys to get back to us from Windows perspective on this, so that we can have a design. I think if we go to that notes, I think we capture a design doc here so far. So this one, it's kind of not a like exact design doc, but like it's kind of like a thought dump. If we go to this one, like we try to capture the problem and the user stories we want to support, and try to figure out a solution that can satisfy all these user stories for that. Yeah, so volume ownership stuff is what we discussed recently. I think previously we discussed the CPU opinion. I think the first few working groups. We also discussed like pre-post hook. I think that's led by Apple. That they want to do this. An isolator that can inject arbitrary commands before container start and after container stop. So they want to inject random commands, and they don't want to build an isolator. They want a generic isolator that can just allow people to specify shell command, things like that. And I think James Peach demoed the enhanced Linux capability support in one of the meetings. I think the recent things we did on Linux capability is we can, first of all, we support ambient capabilities right now, which means you can have a non-root users having certain capability like sysadmin. You can allow a nobody user to mount like C groups, for example. Like for those container on the host network, and assign port using Marathon. The audio just dropped out.
Okay, great.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the host port isolation is like for those container on the host network. Each wants to listen on some host port. Right now, there's no isolation between them, which means that a container that not being assigned a given port can actually listen on that port, because kernel don't provide any isolation for the host network. I think what James P is trying to do is trying to using some of the kernel features to classify classify the ports based on container, using some of the features, and then by scanning, constantly scanning like it's like doing a nestat, trying to figure out which container is doing which port. Is that port assigned to that given container or not? To trying to reject those containers, like kill those containers that use a wrong port, to provide some level of isolation. Not perfect, but I think at least like better than nothing. There's some new kernel feature that we can leverage to make that more efficient, especially the class ID inside a socket buffer thing. And anything else?
Don't have already a port mapping isolator.
Yeah, so that one is a different one. So that one is like each container has a different network namespace. So you already have kind of isolation, but that that kind of set up the host using some of the TC on the host, which is not quite easy to, yeah, I mean, some people prefer not to use that for different reasons. This one just like for those folks that don't want to use that port isolator, then you can have like a limited port isolation for those on the host network.
So I have a couple questions. So the spreadsheet,
Yeah.
are you planning to transition this to like Jira at some point, or?
I do plan to, yeah, I do plan to. So we have a Kanban board, right?
You do?
No. Do we have a Kanban board for
For Mesos, yeah.
So I probably want to do that.
Yeah.
To properly label, have a special label somehow to make sure those tickets show up on the Kanban board, rather than using it's just easier for me to use a spreadsheet at the moment.
Yeah, I was wondering like. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask was like, how did you guys decide on the urgency?
Well, it's pretty much like the people who ask for this feature decide the urgency.
Okay.
Pretty much like a user say, hey, look at the definition here. So T0 means I need that in production right now. Without that, affects my customers. T1 is like the feature has been planned for the next 6 months. We plan to roll out in production. T2 is nice to have. I don't have any plan to use that feature. So that's how I kind of categorize those features. So T0 is something that either a bug or some cleanup we have to do, or like a feature that's so important that affect their customers. Like CPU affinity is kind of like between T0 and T1, because I think it's for some companies it's super important, but so that's the reason. I think it's mainly driven by users. Like whoever requests that feature, define the urgency of that feature.
Okay. And they're working on it, and that's why.
And they're working on it, most likely, because I think all the 10 is pretty much like Mesos users. And they have an edge to be able to work on those kind of features.
Okay. And Mesos contributors.
Mesos contributors, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we also discussed a bunch of stuff. I think the agenda item next time is going to be Gilbert. It's going to, I think we discussed one time, but I think we should continue the discussion. One thing that we want to do is OCI support, given that OCI is 1.0 right now, last week. So that's something we should do ASAP to me. And one thing I really want to do is I don't want to just build another OCI store there. I do want to like unify the whole caching part inside BC, like inside Mesos right now. Right now, some Mesos has different stores. We have cache layers for Docker images, cache layer for AppC images. We have cache layer for Fetcher artifacts. I do want to leverage that, especially OCI defined this very nice like CAS, content-based address, content addressable storage. Thanks. So we do want to see if we can unify all the artifacts management inside Mesos, using that as a kind of foundation to build our OCI support. So that's kind of discussion we're going to do next time.
Like, do you know of anyone who is planning to use those same images?
I don't know immediately, but people are pretty excited about the OCI. OCI is supposed, the OCI spec right now is very compatible with Docker. So I have a feeling that Docker might just support OCI in their Docker registry. So once they did that, then I can see the reason that people will move to that model, the OCI model. So right now the spec between OCI image spec and Docker image spec is pretty much just one single media type. The VND, it's like OCI is VND.OCI, Docker is VND.Docker. So that's the only difference, pretty much. So I can see, and also there's some like publicly supported registry already on OCI. So I'll see like people trying to move to that pretty soon, and Docker will support that too. So, well, I mean, I want to leverage this chance to support this unified artifacts thing, which I think is super valuable for us. It can simplify the GC because right now we have different GC for fetcher and different GC for. It's really unfortunate I would have to do that twice. Like I don't want to do third times on OCI store. So there's urgency to do that.
Cool.
Can I ask about the CPU affinity stuff?
Yes.
CPU affinity is the same thing as CPU pinning?
Well,
Or is it different?
yes. I think the feature, the specific feature they're asking for is pinning some container on specific cores so that it can have optimal performance, like dedicated cores.
So, but I guess what I'm curious about is like, does that kind of escape containerization a little bit because you need to like work with modify essentially resources and how they're allocated?
No, you can use Cgroup to ping all the processes in a Cgroup into particular cores.
So there's a feature in Secret called CPU stats.
You can ping.
And where you can set them to specific CPUs and kernel builder won't put them on different cores if you set them to particular cores.
Yeah, I think we did a lot of discussion there because this is something not new. People have been asking this feature for a long time. And actually, like we also took a look at what Kubernetes does in terms of that. We saw an interesting thread there where like it's got shut down by Borg people initially.
Shut down by
Borg. So Google has some Borg folks that has those experience. I think they mentioned that Borg used to have Borg used to do one thing that so one way to do that, like support CPU pinning and dedicate cores, like for a given box, reserve some things for dedicate cores, and the rest do like either fair sharing or burstable, like CFS and CPU shares. But one comment from that discussion thread is like Borg people are very regret on that. They desperately want to revert that change to a state where there's no like a partition on the node. Like one part of that is dedicated cores, part of that is like Coda and fair sharing. So, but they don't mention the reason why is that, but they desperately regret that, and they want to revert that change. So it's kind of interesting. So we discussed like kind of like the rationale, like what's the pros and the cons on that. Especially like I think that the feedback I give during that discussion is we should definitely look into what other system is doing right now and their rationale why they're doing that, so that we can have a more context to make a decision here. Right?
Yeah,
like, say we need to do this.
I mean, my question is more at a high level as to like what does the API look like? Like the CPU set thing. Like I understand how you would pin a CPU, but like how do you specify that?
If you look at the doc,
requests for that.
Yeah, if you look at doc, it's an abstraction layer. I think what they're suggesting, like proposing, is like have an affinity info inside a container info. Basically, affinity info is saying that for this container, I want all the process of that container to be on the same core or on the same socket or on the same Newman node, if you can see the Newman here. So basically like you specify which CPU you want to use. You specify what's the affinity requirement your container has.
I see. So basically you get quantity like 4 CPUs, and then when you launch the container, you put in the container info how you might want to like pin the 4 that you got.
So Kubernetes has this affinity and anti-affinity things, right? But at a different level, like they have a no affinity, but I don't think they have like CPU core affinity. I think this idea is trying to generalize to that like, core affinity.
Would the idea be here best effort or guaranteed?
He didn't mention that in the design doc. I mean, they're looking for guaranteed, like for cache, you're looking for guaranteed affinity.
There's no demo. They published something yesterday for the CPU affinity.
Yeah, I saw that down.
CPU
that link, but that's driven by Intel. I don't think that's something that Kubernetes is going to like accept short term. To be honest. But, yeah.
Gee, there was, I think there's some prior work, I think Kevin was driving it, and it's the context is similar but more general. It's about topology awareness in general.
Kevin was in that meeting.
Okay. So is this kind of a derivative from that, or is this an MVP of what would eventually?
No, I don't think we have a conclusion yet. I think like the feedback I gave is like, I don't think the doc has sufficient background information for us to make a decision at that. I think the action item, I think is capturing the notes that.
And has anyone actually run benchmarks?
Yeah, I think they have some benchmark to show how much performance improvement you can get by running a given program, but it's like a micro benchmark. It's not very, yeah, I think that's like how many low misses. I think they capture using the perf count to capture like if you ping 2 thread on the same, I think that's the program they run. It's a micro benchmark. So if you ping the thread on the same node, the same socket, the number of no misses is significantly lower, which is kind of expected.
But the performance is not?
I mean, this is a micro benchmark, it doesn't mean nothing, right? We need to have some realistic benchmark, memcached benchmark to see how much performance gain people can have by using this. Like a more like a realistic workload.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so I just give a kind of update on the containerization working group. That's the stuff we are focusing on. And there are a lot of stuff. I don't think we get to any of the rest of the stuff. Yeah, I think we are right now focusing on the tier 0 thing at the moment. And once we address those, we're gonna move to T1. Yeah.
That's good.
And one thing I think I definitely need help is documentation. I mark as T0. I think the right now documentation is pretty weak on Mesos containerizer, so it's pretty bad. So I think the easiest thing we can do for the project is to improve documentation. And so far, I think we don't have an owner because I don't think we have time for that. I think that the goal, I mean, maybe one way is like while we are cleaning up stuff, like the volume stuff, we can like gradually improve the documentation for that part so that we can hopefully get to a state in the future that we can get complete documentation for Mesos containerizer. It's kind of a legacy issue. If any folks are interested in that, contact me. We can work together on this.
Should we do a community docathon where we Mesos here could host people to come for an afternoon, pizza and beer, and write documentation?
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
More beer you write, better the docs get. I'm sorry, more.
That was perfect.
More beer you
That was perfect.
What I meant to say was more docs you write,
Yes.
more beer you get.
Yes.
Better the docs get.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we did something like that at some point, right? I think it was like the last hackathon or something. People wrote docs. Yeah. I mean, there's the process docs that came out of that. I think that Greg was meeting actually.
Greg, man, yeah.
Involved in.
Yeah, we pushed a number of,
Yeah, and I've gone to read those docs and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting.
Let's do it.
So I think
Let's do a doc.
I mean, personally, it's paid off. So I think
Once a quarter or something.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We have to do that.
Yes, so we need a lot of documentation in containerizer. Because for example, we have around 20 isolators in our code base, and we don't have too many documents. So most of them are not documented.
For the new ones, we always document, but I think for some of the old ones that we never do any documentation. So people don't know about those things, pretty much.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, that's it. Great.
Do you wanna give us an update on the community or something?
Can you, Greg, you wanna give updates?
yeah, we can both just share whatever we think of. So the thing that I've been working on with Jay and Jorg is starting up a regular Mesos newsletter that we can publish, just so we have like a steady stream of content going out on the Mesos blog. So I sent out a few emails. We all sent out a few emails to some committers to try to gather content, and Jorg was going to assemble the first issue with a focus on storage work. So we're trying to gather contributions from folks who've been working on storage stuff. Has anyone reached out to you yet?
York told me that he wants to meet with me, but hasn't happened yet.
Okay,
but
cool.
I'm gonna talk to him.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we're gonna rotate the responsibility of actually like assembling the finished document. And we're going for a monthly cadence to start with.
Cool. Sorry, this was for the newsletter thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that going in the middle of the blog?
That was the plan, yeah. Does that seem like a reasonable
That
venue?
sounds awesome.
Yeah, so we'll put it on the blog and then like blast out an email on the list to announce.
Yeah, put on the blog and then email the list that says go read the blog. Cool.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we talked, and today we talked about updating the contribution guidelines.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm gonna start updating those. If anyone's interested in reviewing the updates to those docs, ping me, I can add you to the reviews.
Based on some of the meetings we had.
Yeah, so basically right now it's too daunting, the contribution page, and it's kind of focused towards advanced users. And we want to kind of refocus it to new contributors.
Cool.
And make it less daunting, make it look like it's very easy to contribute to Mesos, and the advantage is that there are a lot more steps to follow and stuff, but the first time you come in, it should be really easy to go to GitHub and send a PR or something like that.
Great.
So that's, yeah, based on the conversation, we want to kind of focus that page right now, if it's too daunting and formatted, so that's one of the things that we kind of stepped up to improve, we want to review it, and anyone else first time can do it as well. So other than the page, we also talked, so this is our second meeting that we had today in this working group. So we talked a bunch about metrics that we want to kind of track. So we had like a list of things that we want to track, like Jira's, mailing lists, Slack channels, daily work contribution, reviews, and Git. Awesome. And we're trying to figure out like what's the kind of tools that we could use there to kind of have a continuous view of this metrics. So we did some one-off ad hoc things in the past. We did some blog posts. We wanted to figure out if there's like some tooling or something that we could use to have a recurring view of it and track it and see it. Every working group, like how are we doing, and we're improving or not, and stuff like that. So we gathered metrics today, and we need to do some discovery around tools that we could use. More tools out there people have mentioned in the working group, and we can look at. So that's on my plate to kind of make some time to look at those.
Cool.
Great. Okay. I can actually give an update on the Mesos 14 upgrade stuff.
Is everyone ready to start using?
So this is a spreadsheet that we've been filling out. What happened?
Just the look on my face was really exciting.
Okay, so these are all the different distros that we considered. CentOS, Scientific Linux, RHEL, Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, and OS X. So the red ones here are past their end of life support from Ubuntu. So I'm considering them to not be worth supporting. 1204 and 1404, which are super old, but they're LTSs, so they still work. All of these have these commands that I've like manually run on Docker images and actually built Mesos in Mesos 14 mode. So the green here is not just this compiler is available. It's actually like I've run make check in Mesos 14 mode in these distros. So as I sent out the email before, Scientific Linux and RHEL, I couldn't find Docker images to run those with, so I asked for help. No one's reached back yet, but I reached out to Cody and know that I could actually just create launch instances on AWS. So I think I'll just do that to test those. Everything else works just fine. Debian even goes back to Debian Jesse, which is actually out of support. OSX has some problems currently with Apple Play. I wanted to get feedback as to whether people would be okay with installing like a newer client or actually stock client as opposed to Apple client on Mac OS X. It's just ruins all VM essentially is all it comes down to. There has been pushback in the past because people thought that it should just work out of the box. But if we're saying that for most of these other distros we need to fetch the new compiler somehow, then I don't really see why OS X gets special treatment there. So my preference would be to say just install a newer compiler.
It never worked.
Sorry?
The default client.
Sorry?
I thought it never worked on the default client.
You thought it would never work?
Okay.
It never worked.
It never worked, but I don't know.
Oh.
Even before, I didn't know. I never make it work before.
Oh.
I always use LVM from group.
Oh. Okay.
When we need a more recent version anyways for the code formatting.
It sounds like he doesn't care.
Yeah. Actually, so what Ben said is that there's actually some libc++ bug that Apple Play ships with and couldn't actually work properly.
So right now you can't use the libc++ that comes with the default client with optimizations because of this std-map bug that's in libc++. So anyone who's already going to be trying to compile an optimization already has to get a new C++.
Right.
Anyway, guess on you get some.
Yeah, when we need anyways a new version of client for the code formatting, change the working on.
Do you mean for the client format stuff?
Yeah.
Kind of. I think for that stuff, what I talked to James Peach about it, and I think the better way to do that one would be to just have a client format binary that's separate, which is fixed for everyone, as opposed to everyone having to fetch a specific version of client format. But even if you say 3.9, like all these different distros finding a specific version of client would be pretty difficult. So for client format, I think we'll have a project specific version that we ship essentially.
Okay.
So yeah, on that in relation to the client format stuff, I think it's not related. But it would definitely be much easier if we just say we don't support Apple client. So that's what we're leaning.
I'm okay with it. Folks have critical objections?
Awesome. As long as it's easy to get this.
Burn cells pretty easy, yeah.
I mean, these are literally the extent of getting the compilers on all of these distros. They fit in a spreadsheet, so I think it's.
So do you have any objection from the mailing list on this?
I haven't heard anything yet, but I also haven't asked yet on the mailing list.
He's asked about C++14, no objection to that. He hasn't asked about
dropping Apple.
dropping Apple.
Oh, dropping Apple, okay.
But I guess yeah. Technically, I think we officially we support it.
Yeah, I think we have some Apple guys online, we should ask them. But, yeah.
Right.
We should, yeah, okay.
Anyway, I'll ask on the mailing list and see what kind of responses I get. But that's the status of things. 2 distros, well, 3 distros need to be tested, and then we can move over.
So I think we're roughly about 3 years late. So in 2020, we'll get to use C++17.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
That's about our time.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
So we all have something to look forward to in 2020.
What's the industry average? And does the committee have any view on adoption or out of all the C++ code, active C++ projects out there, how many, which percentage support C++ 14? Because I'm pretty sure we're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, we definitely are. I mean, so one of the conversations that are happening in the committee is just how do we what do we think about backwards compatibility and if we have language changes that are coming up, but then the effort to actually investigate the language changes are actually smaller than compiler bugs that are bound to be there, right? Then it's okay, well, putting all the effort into the language compatibility isn't actually worth it to that level because people are gonna have to reevaluate their code bases and stuff anyway. And then as far as the community, the C++ community, from the surveys I've seen, most people are still on C++ 11, running on GCC 4.8, 4.9. People are also still running on like 4.4, 4.5. Like it's, yeah, we're definitely ahead of the curve. And I mean, a lot of people are still writing C++ 98, obviously, and I don't think those guys will ever move. But there's definitely that separation in the community. But even in the people who have shifted over to 11, not a lot of them shifted over to 14 yet, from what I've heard. So we're doing fine. And I think 17. You know, it depends. It really depends, like what kind of benefits we get from moving, right?
And also it's kind of, you know, it's probably a naive and late question, but why didn't we move directly to 17? Is it like?
Well, 17 isn't even finished yet.
Okay.
It's not actually published. If we could, that would have been awesome because we would be able to. We would have access to file system. Because that's one of the big reasons why I think we would move to 17. Like try to get there earlier because of file system.
What's the file system?
Yeah,
The file system library. So the file system library from Boost has been like essentially been standardized with some fixes. But right now we do a lot of file system stuff in Stout and Windows compatibility and all that stuff. And Andrew has been wanting to use Boost file system for a long time. But because of the binary dependency, because it's it's not a header only. Yeah, the file system library isn't header only, and so there's been some issues creating dependency on Boost file system.
So what would it mean in terms of distros that we support? Like which of these we would need to drop to be able to?
Once 17 is published.
Yeah. Because I think that's also a showstopper on our end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a separate like investigation I would have to do. Like a lot of them, well, probably a lot of them.
Plus, standard hasn't been printed, and I'm sure there's going to be bugs the next 3 years. When you just go back and you look at like C++ 11 bugs that people have solved.
Implementations have definitely been catching up quicker than before, but I would imagine we would be on 14 for at least a year or two. Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited about 14. I hope you are too.
Oh, I am.
I think one thing as part of this effort it would be nice to do is have an official list of supported platforms. On our page, we don't have it.
So
very arbitrary.
Related to that, I was chatting with Embark about this a little earlier today as well. We have Docker images for a bunch of different things we build on, right? Can we put those Docker images and even the Docker files someplace public? Because right now, when you go to like build Mesos, when you go to the docs page, it's like, oh, and if you're on this thing, run these 7 commands. And you're in this thing, run these 8 commands. You're in this thing, run these 9 commands. And it would be great to just say, if you want to try this, here's the Docker file, here's a Docker image. You could just go and literally build Mesos inside of this Docker image Docker file.
The problem is what happens when you try to run it. I mean, it should be very clear that people should not be attempting to run inside said images, right?
Why can't they run inside?
In production.
Yeah, in production. Yeah.
No, even the tests won't pass, right? A lot of the tests won't pass.
A lot of root tests won't pass, but
Like for testing,
root tests should pass.
but I mean, like we don't run all the tests. And for example, not all of the tests compile inside Docker.
So how do we do this with CI? I guess I don't understand.
We disable them.
We don't run the root test.
Just run them outside.
Yeah, no, we run,
CI is virtual machines.
yeah, for root tests, we spin virtual machines so that we can
Internal
run.
CI, we run them on VMs with root access, and we don't use Docker.
Yeah.
On the SFCI, we use Docker, but we disable root tests. That's the current state of the art.
Okay, next question. What if we used a Docker image, but ran it with the Mesos containerizer? Could we run all the root tests?
The
on,
Mesos
why
inside-
Well-
Probably needs a lot more effort to make that.
Yeah, there is like Docker in Docker
Oh, but this isn't Docker.
yeah, like Docker in.
Well, that thing is already working. Docker in Docker is working already.
Mesos inside.
Yeah, Docker inside Mesos is already working.
Like any Mesos agent. But I guess we run the POSIX agents, but we.
But we can-
Then we check inside Mesos containerizer creation, we should see what breaks.
May check should pass as long as you don't use any new tests. That should.
Yeah, on-road test share. Group tests. Yeah, I think that's a big effort, but at least as part of this, it would be awesome if we can really get into it, like this is what we support.
Yeah.
And once we support, I want Mr. CI to be updated to that's for all this, run make check on all these images.
That'd be beautiful.
When we say support, we actually testing it.
That'd be beautiful.
What we could do is like right now we like essentially generate the Docker file, right? And so we could actually like use the opportunity to fix that and have Docker files for all of these things and
We should have images just in Docker Hub that people just pull.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It'd be great to just have like an image or just like
Do
make.
we have a Docker Hub Mesos? Does that belong to us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be great to just put those up there because people could at least like pull down and try to build it and play with it. We could even have ones where Mesos already built inside, where people could just play. Obviously, there's things I have to do, but if that's obviously there's things we can't do. But if that's the case as well, let's do the same with VMs. Let's just create some VMs when the stuff's already ready. Yeah,
There definitely are Amazon AMIs that we can point people to.
Yeah, we should just make them standard supported things. It's something we could do in the Dockathon and just have it there. And so like, oh, you want to try to run this? Like click a button, you can get the VM in the cloud. And then you can just try. Super simple.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
great, but.
It's a Dockathon. It's a Dockathon.
Hackathon project. Can do that in Hackathon.
Okay,
Cool.
so yeah, that's about it. We're close. Thank you.
We have someone online, maybe he has something to say,
Vishnu, Avinash and Vishnu? Yeah. Do you guys have anything to add?
No.
Well, we have 3 minutes. We can cut. Oh, Avinash left. All right. All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll see you in
Maybe a month.
Thanks, everybody. All right. See ya.